gold pencil, which we are going to color the entire lion with. And like I said in the Stark nice sharp point. Like I said in the Stark banner video, gold is a very temperamental. Actually, I shouldn't say it's temperamental. It's a very unique pencil among Prismacolor pencils because, like it and its sibling silver, it's metallic, which is like no other pencils, and creates an interesting pattern that kind of has that I reconcile with each banner that I do. Now, I actually found out in this book that I got from the used bookstore here in Minnesota called Half Price Books that gold and silver are not actually painted with like gold and silver paint. Gold is actually uses yellow, and silver uses white. And the reason that it does this is because when you paint with metallic gold and silver, it actually creates like a black flecking, like a fleck pattern on the shield. After a while, there's something in the paint that causes a pattern that people don't want, and so they substituted yellow for gold and white for silver. I remember reading this, and I also realized there's a lot of white and a lot of yellow in the Westeros banners. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna stick with metallic gold and metallic silver for these. And I did dozens, I would say dozens and dozens of banners with gold and metallic before I noticed that it was creating this vacuumed carpet look, which you'll definitely see. I'll keep it. I won't treat the color yet, or kind of. I won't swipe it out. I'll just kind of leave it as is, so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. But when I started to redo, there was a lot of banners I decided to redo because I didn't like the way the gold looked on the page. The one that probably drove me nuts the most was House Baratheon of Storm's End in the Stormlands. And obviously that's the one with, King Robert. And technically Joffrey and Tommen and Myrcella are part of House Baratheon, even though we all know whose house they really belong to. And that one, I did not take care to color the gold in the right way, and it created a very unfortunate pattern that made me cringe every time I looked at it, and I had to redo it. When I would go back and redo a lot of the gold and silver banners, I would make the effort to make sure I kind of swiped out those patterns and made it look like one solid gold color. Aside from Tyrion, who's pretty widely featured in the TV show and the books as well, I would say the most interesting character of House Lannister aside from Tyrion, is Tywin Lannister. Tyrion, Jaime, and Cersei's father. And one of the things I've noticed about George R.R. Martin's characters is the fact that he can draw them in very broad strokes, but also, which also defines them in a way that you'd think most characters would need to be kind of have more character description. Like, for example, Ned Stark is very honorable. His honor means more to him. His honor means more to him than almost anything other than his family. And when he went to King's Landing and played the Game of Thrones, something he was not used to. He didn't grow up around. He wasn't around it. He was not used to it. He used his honor to play the game, and that turned out deadly. So he was very honorable, but very naive. And he was also kind of a emotionally cold character too. So 3 pretty broad strokes, but it actually paints a pretty kind of already vivid description of him. And with Tywin Lannister, there's really 2 broad strokes that he was drawn with. And I would say he was the greatest or the most effective leader in the history of Westeros, because he was the hand of the king from Mad King Aerys for, I believe it was 20 to 25 years, since he was, I think, started when he was 20, and it lasted until Robert's Rebellion, also known as War of the Usurper to those of the Targaryen household. So not only was he the most effective, he was a very good military commander and very good leader who was able to easily make very difficult decisions, partially because of his ruthlessness. At the same time, he was a terrible, terrible father. And one thing about people in history that I've kind of observed is you can't have someone written in history with greatness without the dark side of the coin looming, or how do I want to say that? You can't have someone you can't have someone in history drawn with greatness without there being a dark side of that coin that sometimes people don't see, and sometimes doesn't come out until long after they're gone. And Tywin was pretty merciless, could be pretty merciless. In fact, one of the most well-known stories about him, I guess this would be possibly a spoiler ahead. This has to do with the history of Westeros. So it's a detail that is in the books. So if you don't want to hear it, I'll put a little sign at the bottom. So if you want to skip ahead, but essentially the story is about the reigns, House Rayne and House Tarbeck. And what happened was, House Rayne is a house that is about as I believe they were just as old as Lannister, and they were almost as prominent too. And their house sigil is a lion, rampant, regardant, meaning looking the other way. It is a crimson lion on a silver field. Now, whereas the Lannisters made their wealth mining gold out of Casterly rock, the Rains of Castamere, hence the song name, Rains of Castamere, got their fortune mining silver. And like the Lannisters, they built their hold into the cave system was a fortified cave system that had only one entrance. And they decided to defy. I don't remember. This is a story I did not look up before doing this, but they were defying. They were defying the. I don't know if it was King Aerys or if it was Tywin specifically, but they decided that they did not want to be that. They decided they were just as prominent and just as important as the Lannisters. Hence the song lyrics. And who are you, the proud lord said, that I should bow so low? Only a cat of a different coat is all the truth I know. And so what happened was they were held up in their fast in Castamere, and they had plenty of provisions, and they were prepared for a siege. Tywin did not want to deal with that, so what he ended up doing was flooding the caverns and drowning the lot of them. I don't remember if Tarbex were in that cavern as well, but he dealt with them. But they were also, that family was also extinguished at the same time. So forgive me if I don't know can't remember the entire story. For that, I didn't read that one. I haven't read that story up recently, but that was pretty interesting as well. In fact, if you do happen to read The World of Ice and Fire, that is the one part of the book I would say highly recommend reading. If you're going to read any part of it, to be honest, I would read the story about the section with Mad King Aerys and the part of Robert's Rebellion, because that part of the story has the most that has a lot of characters that do appear in the Game of Thrones books. Barristan Selmy actually has a pretty important role at the defiance of Duskendale, and I won't go into that. I'll save that story for when I do the Selmy Bannister, which is 3 wheat stalks on brown. So yes, broad strokes for Tywin Lannister. Good leader, ruthless leader, and horrible father. And there is a fan theory, and I don't think this isn't spoiling anything because it hasn't been proven yet, and it was never proven in the show. But the theory about why Tywin hated Tyrion so much is because the Mad King was being hosted at Casterly Rock, and I don't know if it was a rumor or not, but apparently there was indication that he forced himself on Tywin's wife Joanna, and she died giving birth to this monstrous baby that came out, which was Tyrion, with mismatched eyes and a giant head. Now it hasn't, and the other reason. So basically, the theory is that Tyrion is actually half Targaryen, so he's half Valyrian. I think there actually is, but the theory is that you could argue that the reason he hates Tyrion so much is that he was responsible for his wife's death, and she was the only thing in his life, in Tywin's life, that ever made him laugh, or ever made him smile, ever gave him any sense of joy. She was the only thing that kind of brightened up his life, and when she died, he lost any sense of humor he may have had, and he pretty much took it out on Tyrion. There's one story where when Tyrion grew up and he finished schooling, he wanted to travel the free cities of Braavos, much like a student would backpack through Europe in between, during a gap year in between high school and college. Instead, Tywin made him in charge of the drains and cisterns of Casterly Rock. And according to Tyrion, the drains never functioned as well as when he was in charge of them. I had an idea for one portion of this coloring to actually do some quotes by Tyrion. I thought that would be kind of fun because he has some of the best quotes in the entire book. I think what I'm going to do is actually pause here. I'm toying with the idea of just doing half-hour videos because I think those are a little more palatable for people to watch. So I'm going to actually stop right there. I'll come back, and the next video I'm going to do is actually going to be no talking. I'm going to play around with the format, kind of see what people like and what people don't, like. So if you like me doing these Westeros fun facts, I'll keep doing more of those. If you like just no talking, and that seems to take off, I'll kind of mix some of that in as well. But I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to come back with the next video. It's going to be no talking.